For deciding to take care of fish, the first thing you need to decide is what kind of fish you want to have. For beginners, there are a wide variety of fish you can have. The recommended list includes tetras, mollies, swordtails, betas, danios, platies, guppies, um, a coolie loach, which I'd never even heard of, cherry barb, firemouth, chichiliad, pearl gourami, tiger plecos, koi catfish, and glowfish. Um, about each of these kinds for betas, it's normally recommended to have them on their own. No other fish in the vicinity with them, in a tank with them, due to their aggressive nature. If you do decide to have other fish with them, make sure one, it's not another beta, and two, any other fish in the tank with them are not into nipping other fish. Um, should another fish try to nick a beta, it would not end well for them. Uh, Betas are not really picky eaters. They'll eat pretty much anything you put in the tank for them. For swordtails, they usually like plant-based diets and occasionally like a live treat, such as a brine shrimp or something like that. Um, as far as their water condition demands, they don't have very many. Um, they like to be kept in groups of more than one. They're more of a community fish, so if you're going to have a swordtail, it's better to get more than one at a time. They like to have a strong flow of water to be able to swim in. So if you're going to get swordtails, it's best to set your tank up so that there is a nice flow for them. With mollies, these are really easy to care for. They're pretty versatile. They can be kept in either fresh or salt water. They're not as aggressive as most other fish. They prefer to be in warmer temperatures of water between 25 to 28 degrees, and they like a plant-based diet, but an occasional brine shrimp or something similar is okay for them. For a Cory catfish, they're bottom feeders. They have a 20-year lifespan. They're better in groups of 3, and they like a variety of foods between either plant-based or meat-based. So algae discs work for them, pellets, flake, anything like that. For a tiger pleco, these in most pet shops, if you go in and ask for a catfish, this is probably what they're going to give you, is a pleco of some sort. As far as their diet, they like any pellets, sinking pellets. They're bottom feeders. So anything that sinks to the bottom that the rest of the community in the tank hasn't eaten, they will eat. They like pellets, brine shrimp, and bloodworms. They are very peaceful, but they are also territorial, so they need to have a space where they can hide, and that's theirs when they're not sniffing around the bottom for food. These also do have a pretty big long lifespan compared to other fish. They have a lifespan of 8 years. For pearl gouramis, not quite sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. They're pretty okay with anything. They're not picky eaters. They'll eat anything plant-based or meat-based is okay for them. It is recommended for them to have a variety of both of those. They like to have hiding places, such as a floating fern in the tank for them to hide around. And they do require a little bit of airspace at the top of the tank. Instead of filling the tank all the way up with water, they need a little bit of space so they can get some air up there at the top. For a firemouth chichilid, the reason they're called that is because during breeding times, their mouths the color of their mouths becomes a little bit red. They're usually pretty friendly with other fish, except at breeding time. So it's recommended if you can to have them in their own enclosure. However, if you do want to put them in with other fish, it's great. It's best to have somewhere that they can hide to lay their eggs, such as an overturned plant um, container or something like that. They, as well, are not picky eaters, so they'll eat pretty much anything you put in there. For cherry barbs, these are very, um, there's not very many of them in the wild. They're very tolerant and very friendly with other fish. They're also very active, and they've got a pretty red color, so they're fun to watch. They're best in groups, and they like to have live plants around. Um, when you're introducing them into your aquarium, they're kind of shy and timid about the space at first. It will take them a couple weeks to get used to it, and at first they may not eat as they're getting used to the tank, but once they get used to their surroundings and their environment and they become more comfortable, they'll begin to eat like they normally should. They as well will eat pretty much anything you give them. For the Kuli Loach, the look of it, it looks very similar to almost a snake. It's an eel-like fish. These are very docile. They're bottom feeders as well, and they easily adapt to any water changes that may happen. Um, they um, they like to be kept with at least 3 at a time, if not more, in the tank, so that way they can be happy. They like to have friends around. For guppies, these are schoolfish as well. They're usually very calm, and they're not picky eaters at all. They will eat pretty much anything you put in the tank. Um, they do breed like crazy, so if you have these, make sure they're either in a space where you wouldn't mind if they bred, or make sure you've got all of the same gender in one enclosure, so that way they're not giving you more than you want. For platies, these are very peaceful fish. They're not picky eaters, and they will eat any type of food, any type of plate food, or most frozen foods that you might put in there. For Danios, these are highly recommended for beginner aquariums. These ones, they're very active fish, and they love any type of fish flakes that you might put in the tank. For tetras, they love to be in groups. They don't like to be by themselves at all. They have a pretty simple diet, basic flakes, but they do like to have occasionally either bloodworms or brine shrimp. These ones as well are used a lot to create glowfish. Glowfish are fish that have been genetically altered so that they glow kind of a neon color, especially if you put them in like a blue light or a dark light. They'll get a pretty glowing color. And they come in various colors: neon, green, pink, red, yellow, blue, purple. You can get all of those colors. Tetras are great for those. Guppies also are great for those. So if you're looking for those, it's either usually a tetra or a guppy of some sort. So the things to look for, if you didn't want to get any of those kinds of fish, if you want to get a different kind of fish for a beginner tank, the things to look for are to make sure that they have a lot of endurance, they can handle any changes that may come in the tank environment. Usually it's recommended that if there are going to be changes in the environment, they're done gradually instead of right on the spot, because so that way the fish can adjust to the changes. You also want to make sure that they're easy to care for, so that way you're not getting yourself into something you're not sure you can handle. And they also want to make sure that they're pretty peaceful and they will get along well with others. And also that their size is good for the tank that you have. As far as what size tank to get, it depends on one, how many fish you want to get, and two, how many are what type of fish you want. Because there are a few different tank sizes. There are the smaller tanks, which are great, just the little fish bowls, which are great for um, if you're going to have a betta or a goldfish by himself or herself. Those are great for that. Bigger tanks, there's 5 gallon, 10 gallon, 15 gallon, 20 gallon. You can get it in pretty much any of the gallon increments you want. But it's important to know what size tank you have for a couple reasons. One, you want to know how many fish you can actually have in that size tank. Two, you want to know what size tank you have, how much water is in it. So that way you know how much to put in if you need to treat the fish for any diseases that they might have or for any water care treatments that you may need to put in the tank. As I said earlier, the tank size affects how big the fish get. So a bigger tank means the fish are going to get bigger. A smaller tank means they're going to stay smaller. As far as what decorations to put in the tank, first, the most important thing to start with is what type of stuff you're going to have on the bottom. For usually, the best thing to have for fish in general are just the rocks that you can get at any pet store. And there's all different colors and sizes and shapes and whatnot. Those are better, especially if you have bottom feeders, so that way they can get into the rocks and be able to pick out the extra food that's fallen down there for them. As far as if you have, for instance, if you've got some snails in there, snails like sand better. They like to pick through the sand to find the waste that they like to eat at the bottom. A lot of fish like to have somewhere to hide. They do have designs that the fish can go into and hide in there. They have logs, they have little castles, all types of things. And most fish also do love to have plants around. There are live variety of plants and there are synthetic plants. A lot of fish do prefer live, but synthetic for some fish does work just fine. For water care, one of the most important things to look out for is to monitor the pH for most fish. The best pH balance is at 7%, is at 7 on the pH scale. It's best to have testing strips and to use a pH balancer to monitor that. When you're using your testing strips, it's best to have testing strips that test for not only pH, but for also the ammonia and nitrate levels and other things. So that way you can keep track of those. With nitrate and ammonia levels, these test strips will tell you if it's too high or too low. And then there are products that you can use to help either increase or decrease these levels as needed. Usually, you're going to end up having to decrease them if they're off at all. Ammonia levels can be affected if there is, usually if there's a high ammonia levels, it's probably due to there being a deceased fish in the tank. With evaporation and algae, evaporation is pretty easy to fix. Put more water in it and you're good to go. With algae, the closer the tank is to the door, the more evaporation you're going, or the more algae you're going, the closer it is to a light source, like out the windows, the more algae you're going to have. And the more algae, the less air in the water and the less sunlight that gets in, and it does negatively affect the tank environment. And that is how many times a lot of fish will end up dying because of the algae content in there. They do have algae control products that you can use to help control the algae levels. Also, they do provide, there are little tube hoses, hookups that you can use to help vacuum out excess waste at the bottom of the tank, so that way you can help keep it clean. Um, in the filter, there are usually a filter that you have to provide for the fish. One, it helps clean out harmful things in the water. Two, it also helps keep the water flowing for them, and it helps mix up the water so that it's constantly getting more air into it for them so that they can breathe in the water. They do have the filters, and it's recommended that with the filter for the carbon filter for these, that you change it once a month for them. They also have slime coat additives that you can add to help keep the fish's scales healthy. Types of fish food. The most commonly used fish food are flakes or pellets. Most fish love these and can handle these just fine. There are also freeze-dried foods you can find, and frozen foods as well. Some people also use what's called feeder fish. These are kind of like goldfish for bigger fish. It's highly unrecommended that you use feeder fish because they are raised in poor environments and commonly have diseases and parasites that can be given to your fish. Um, other live foods such as brine shrimp or bloodworms, a lot of varieties of fish love those. And then a lot of fish like algae discs. For fish under 3 months old, it is recommended that they are fed about 6 small meals a day. And some of those meals can come from algae that you've allowed to grow in the tank. If you're on vacation, you can leave the tank for up to 7 days. With the smaller fish, with bigger fish, they can go a little bit longer. It's not recommended that you ask a friend to come over and feed them. If you do, it is recommended to measure out how much needs to be fed whenever you want the friend to feed them, so that way they're not overfeeding your fish. Overfeeding can cause more excess waste than you really need, and it can cause a lot of problems for the fish. Diseases that the fish can get, there are diseases due to stress, diseases due to parasites and bacteria, and there's one common viral infection and then a fungus infection. The diseases due to stress include clamped fin, and that's when instead of being their fin on their backs, instead of having it fanned out as they swim around, it's usually clamped to their backs. And this can be caused just by regular stress, or there could be another underlying issue such as an infection or something like that. And the treatment for it just includes whatever treatment you think is necessary. If it's stress, check the water. Is the water okay? If the water's fine, then there's probably an infection of some sort. The best thing to do if there is an infection is to treat with something that is made for the infection, such as Melafix or Tetragard. Fish ick. Usually you can tell that that's what they've got if you look at them, and it's really easy, very easy to tell if the fish is a black fish because it shows up as little white spots on the fish that kind of resemble either white sand or salt. And also when they have this, they'll be at the water surface kind of gasping for air, and they'll start scratching against other things. And they'll also have their fins clamped. The best thing to use for this is something called Ick Guard that will help reduce the stress and will help ease their problems with this ailment. For parasites, there are a whole slew of different parasites that they can have. There are gill mites. Usually you can tell if they are gill mites if they're gasping at the water surface or if their gills are only partially opened. This is usually caused, as with most parasites, it's usually caused by introducing infected fish into the tank. The best thing to do for this is Tetra Lifeguard to help take care of those. For fish lice, you'll see the fish will have red spots and inflammation. And the best treatment for uh, lice and for a couple other parasites is to either do a formalin bath, which is put them in seawater in seawater for about 5 minutes a day, um, until the parasites die and fall off, or to do iodine baths every day until they fall off. Body or gill flukes, the signs for these are scratching, and there's an extra mucus layer on the gills and the body. They have reddened skin that, and their fins look kind of chewed away, and their gills as well. These can usually cause under other infections. The causes for this one is actually undesirable environmental conditions. For these, they're actually in the tank water usually. However, they don't, as long as the water conditions are fine, they don't usually attack the fish. The best thing to do for this is tetraparasite guard. Anchor worms, with these, the signs are they'll be scratching against things. They'll have whitish green threads on their skin, and their skin will be inflamed. The causes for this is, again, introducing infected fish. The treatment is cleaning and removing the parasite, so you'll actually have to hold the fish and try to clean them as best you can, or bathing in seawater for 5 minutes a day, so that formalin treatment again, until the parasites fall off. For the infections, one that is very hard to see and to really tell if they have, and it's hard to get rid of, it's called dropsy. The signs for it, they'll be bloated and they'll have protruding scales, so instead of the scales being flat to them like they normally are, they'll actually be sticking out. Causes of this are bacterial infection in the kidney. The treatment is Tetra Life Guard. Next, we have the tail, fin, and mouth rot. For this, the signs are deterioration of their tail and their fins, and they'll have a fading color in those areas. So if they've usually got a bright color, like they're bright red, that red will kind of fade in those areas where it normally doesn't. This is a bacterial infection, and the best thing to do for that is Tetra Life Guard. Ragged tail fin disease, another bacterial infection, kind of similar to tail, mouth, and fin rot. Deterioration of the tails and fins, and they'll be frayed, and the color will fade as well. And again, the best treatment is Tetra Life Guard. The virus that is very hard to get rid of for the fish, and if you think your fish has this, it's best to quarantine them away from the other fish in the hopes that the other fish won't get it as well, since it is a virus. The signs of this, it's called hemorrhagic septicemia. The signs include bulging eyes, the bloated abdomen, bruised-looking reddish tints to their eyes and skin and gills and fins, and they'll have open sores. And that's just for the external things. The internal things that you can't see and that make this disease so bad for fish is that they'll have internal hemorrhaging in their organs. And it's usually introduced by already infected fish. There is no known cure. However, treating with Tetra Life Guard can help decrease mortality by fighting off secondary infections. So if you see that one of your fish has it, again, the best thing to do is to isolate them from the rest of the fish and then treat them with Tetra Life Guard in the hopes that they'll be able to fight off the virus. Last is fungus. Any type of fungus that they might get, signs of a fungus, they'll have gray or whitish growths on them. Causes include any type of injury, bacterial infection, or parasites, and the best treatment for that is Tetra Life Guard. So to wrap up the diseases, when in doubt, if it looks like your fish might be sick, the best thing to do is to give them something like Tetra Life Guard or similar to help them try and fight it off. And that is all about beginner fish care.